Stand up.
Hello and welcome to the Friday Show. It's the Friday Show, a little bit lighter. No news, no bells and whistles, no Pico introduction. Usually just me and a guest or two. Usually try to get Christian Finnegan. Often Ophira Eisenberg joins us. This week, I've just got one very special guest who I'm so excited to share my conversation with her. She's been a vitally important person in my life in such a weird way because we really don't know each other. We haven't spent much time in person together, but I was referred to her by our mutual friend Paul Rykoff a few years back after I lost my job. I was talking to her about some new opportunities. Long story. Allison Jaslow, who's my guest today, turned out to be the best friend a person could have. She's just an amazing person. She's now just been appointed to be the president, the CEO, rather, of IAVA, Iraq and Afghanistan Veterans of America. Longtime listeners know I've been working with that organization for a really long time. Used to host a segment called Stand Up with the Veteran every single week on the old show. And now I am still in touch with them and still connected to them, especially because Allison has just become the new CEO, organization's third CEO, and I'm really excited to have her joining me on the show. She was unanimously elected CEO in a vote by the board of directors because she's as impressive to them as she certainly has been to me. She served 2 combat tours in Iraq. She won the Bronze Star and the Army Commendation Medal, the Bronze Oak Leaf Cluster. After her service, she did so many other things. She became the chief of staff to Illinois Congresswoman Cheri Bustos after leading her successful campaign to unseat an incumbent member of Congress. She served as communications aide in the White House to press secretary for former Virginia Senator and decorated Vietnam veteran Jim Webb, and in leadership roles for various other members of Congress. I could read about her bio, and it's so impressive for the next 15 minutes. I really could, but I just want to get to my conversation with her. She's so impressive, and she's been a really close personal friend of mine. I reached out to her several times over the past couple of years, like I said, after I lost my gig at Sirius. And then I reached out to her when Val and I were going through a really tough time, and she was like, I don't know what to tell you about your relationship or your marriage. And then she told me, but if I have any advice, it's work on yourself right now. And other people had said that, but when Allison Jaslow tells you some advice, you listen really closely. And that's exactly what I did, and it mattered so much. We spent hours on the phone over the years. I've connected her with several other veterans who she's done really amazing things for, and I just cannot say enough good things about this woman who is now the CEO of IAVA. We had a great conversation. We talked about her life, her career, and her work at IAVA, and I think you're going to really like it. It's a great guest for the Friday show. I'm really happy to have her. Go support IAVA at IAVA.org. Couldn't ask for a better guest on the week of the 20th anniversary of the invasion of Iraq by the United States, and I'm really happy that I had such a candid and honest conversation with this amazing person. Ladies and gentlemen, Allison Jaslow.
Yes, we've got her now, and what an honor it is to have the CEO of IAVA, my good friend Allison Jaslow. First and foremost, congratulations on your new job.
Thanks, Pete, and thanks for having me. It's actually a pleasure and a true joy to be able to hang out with you today.
I mean, it's not as good as like hanging out with Gail King on CBS This Morning. I just watched that. You had 3 anchors in like 5 minutes, and they're all firing questions. You handled that as well as anybody, better than most people would in that situation. But very cool that you were doing that and other media. Thank you. Yes, it helps that they're all lovely humans, too. Yeah, for sure. There's a lot. Those people, you know, are a lot of folks are of the generation of understanding the wars, the conflicts that you're now and have always been advocating for the veterans of, that you're a veteran of. So there seems to be a kind of a sensitivity and an understanding of it because we all kind of went through it to some extent together. But I want to start my conversation with you, not as the CEO of IAVA, but as my friend, Allison Jaslow, and let people get to know you a little bit the way I have. And I want to also just start by saying in front of everybody, thank you for being such an amazing friend and person in my life when you really, like, we didn't have any other connection. You just took so much time with me, and I will never, ever be able to thank you enough for what you've meant to me in really personal, tough situations with my job, with my marriage, even when you were like, I don't know if I'm suited for this, but yet you gave me the best advice was maybe, Pete, you should work on you. And I'm done talking. I just wanted to say that in front of everybody, in front of you, and have it on the tape. And you have been amazing to me. Thank you.
Well, thank you for your gratitude. To be honest, somebody who sees myself as a servant leader, that's what I aspire to be in the world. Being in service to others is truly what fills my cup up. So as much as I guess, made an impact on you, it's fulfilling to me to be able to be in service to others. So thank you for giving me the opportunity. And I'm thrilled to have built this friendship through our time over the last complicated years, both for us personally, but also the world.
Yeah. Knowing that you're always a text away has always been, super meaningful to me. And I just, I don't know what else to say. I'll talk about it after you leave. I'll talk about you after you leave here. But let's talk about you a little bit, because you have done so many different jobs in your life. You've had so many exciting roles in your life, and you're still so young in terms of like a career, but you were in the military. You fought you served in Iraq 2 tours. You then went and worked for a congresswoman. You worked for all kinds of nonprofits. You worked with the entertainment industry for a while. You're a writer, and now you're the CEO of a major nonprofit organization. And I just wonder how you look back on all of those things and think about, how it's all led you to where you're at, or what you like the most. Any comments about the Allison Jaslow biography, which is really, really got a lot of texture to it?
Well, I think the thing that I would say first and foremost is there's a reason why I'm still single, because I seem to keep at it the way that I have. So that's 2023 goals, work on that a little bit more. But, the Army was the dream growing up. From age 13, I thought that my service to country would be in uniform for my entire career. At the time, there was not a woman 4-star general. And so, if you're going to aim high. That was what I was hoping to be, was the first Army, 4-star general, if another woman didn't beat me to it. I was sworn in 2004. The wars were raging at the time, wars that hadn't started when I started college. I was an ROTC scholarship student. So, sophomore year, 9/11 happened. And of course, the trajectory of my military service changed dramatically.
Yeah.
It's not the wartime service, but basically some realities of the bureaucracy and some leadership failures that ultimately caused me to make the decision during my second deployment to get out. But I think I've tried to, regardless of the capacities I've served in since, still try to make an impact on the greater good of our country and on behalf of my fellow countrymen. And I've, served in the White House, supporting senior staff at the White House, on political campaigns across the country, trying to get people who I believe, will do good in elected leadership roles, elected into office. Got the opportunity to then join a woman who I got elected to office after I was her campaign manager to be her chief of staff, which, was a meaningful experience to be able to set somebody up for success, when they get in there fresh out of their civilian careers and find themselves all of a sudden in Congress, which is a very different environment than the private sector.
Yeah. Love to know. Just, you could fill an hour talking about your experience with Congresswoman Bustos, right?
Oh, definitely. Who remains a friend ever since. And I've, tried to support her success, throughout the rest of her tenure, got an opportunity to go back and work with her for a little bit a few years ago. But yeah, and it's, I couldn't have a lot to say just in my time working for her if she wasn't also a good member who worked her tail off trying to serve the people who she represented, in the heartland, and really was an important voice, I believe, in Congress representing working people, somebody who working people could see themselves in, which, you can't say about a lot of members of Congress, no matter what side of the aisle they're on. But she was married to a cop, the sheriff in Rock Island County. She was a scrappy newspaper reporter before she got into, healthcare communications, but really was and still is salt of the earth. And I think more people like her, if there were more people like her in Congress, I think the building would be a lot better off.
Well, you've given me an opportunity for an amazing segue, or just another question. If there were more people like Allison Jaslow, then we would all be better off. But why haven't you become cynical, jaded, and bitter. And I know to some extent that's there. There's part of that in, you have your days, you have your moments. But I mean, working in Congress and working in other bureaucracies, working in the White House, working in government, how do you maintain being in the military in a war, this kind of optimism that you can succeed in your mission with all of the different obstacles that are in your way with all of it? How have you not become bitter and cynical?
I don't know. It's in my DNA. I think it's really hard. And I have a great deal of empathy for the many Americans who are just so fed up with Washington. They have every right to be. I spent some time teaching in the last couple of years, and I was the first to validate my students' irreverence. A lot of people are pretty flippant about the younger generation, but my students, many of them were born like right around 9/11. And so for their entire adult lifetime, leaders in this country have been failing them. So the fact that they just don't want to listen to anybody and just, are ready to sort of like bust up the system themselves, I think is totally valid. At the same time, I tried to help them understand why they should still remain optimistic themselves. For example, it was really important to me to bring into my students my ROTC contract that I signed. I served during Don't Ask, Don't Tell. And it's a really abstract concept, but when you have to look at that contract and see how it's delineated, that basically like, I call Don't Ask, Don't Tell, Don't You Dare. It's like you can't even eyeball somebody of the same sex, or you might lose your scholarship, have to pay back all of your money, get kicked out of the military, right? Which has now been repealed, but it's been repealed in their lifetime. So as much as change that they want to happen, and as much as I and they together want to challenge the status quo, we've also come a long way in many regards over the last couple of decades. And so I guess for me, to answer your question specifically, I try to remind myself of those things so I can remain optimistic. And as a matter of like principle for the way that I live my life, I feel like somebody's got to remain optimistic. If I care about this country and still believe in its hope, as a matter of principle, have to remain optimistic. Otherwise, if not me, who?
Me, because I share that with you. And you spread that to me in my lowest points, by the way. Like, I agree with that. You just kind of voiced, I think, how I feel, that even though it's easy to be cynical and bitter and negative and pessimistic and think that everything terrible that could happen will happen, some of us, shouldn't be that way for any number of reasons. Like you just said, I really like that. I also love that example that you mentioned, bringing in your ROTC contract. From what I heard was, listen, I knew I was gay, but yet I was going to serve in an organization that wouldn't recognize that thought it was illegal, that would kick me out. And yet I did it because for the greater good, because we don't get everything that we want, because you can't necessarily, if you want to affect change, then join the organization and try to create that. That's kind of what I heard you say as an example to these young people who want to just punch out and punch everything. And then you show them, hey, listen, that's not how life, career works. Is that what I heard?
I didn't really start to get in touch with the fact that I was gay until later in my service. And I think that was in part, I mentioned beforehand, serving in the military was my dream. If you have to sign a contract like that when you're 18, like why? Like when you go to college, that's when everybody gets to learn who they are, right? Like that's when you start to learn about yourself. Would I even go there if I thought I would lose my life's dream at that point? Of course, it made things more complicated the longer I was in and the more I kind of got awareness around my sexuality. But I think bigger picture, I want them to know that in their lifetime, that's not a contract that anyone else has to sign anymore. And so, even when they can get frustrated with for the world as it is, just in their own lifetime and in the time that they've been on this earth, there has been some great progress that's happened. Whether it was a repeal of Don't Ask, Don't Tell, but also marriage equality, has happened not only through the courts, but now codified in Congress. And so, there are days where I think all of us feel like we've taken big steps backwards in some regard. But I think it's important when we can get the space to remind ourselves of the steps forward that we've made too. over time and in each of our individual lifetimes.
Let's talk about one of your lifetimes, which was in Iraq, as a way to get into talking about your role now at IAVA. When did you first go? When did you first get your assignment that you're going to deploy to Iraq? Where were you in your mind? What was your rank? What was your responsibilities at that point?
So I was sworn into the military in it coincides with your graduation when you're ROTC. Mm-hmm. So May of 2004, by the time I was in my officer basic course that summer, I knew that I was headed to a unit that was going to deploy. I got to Fort Carson, middle of September, Fort Carson in Colorado of that year. And then by the day after Thanksgiving, I was headed to Kuwait en route to Iraq. Was there for close to a year that go round, got back in October of 2005. I was a platoon leader during that tour. I deployed with a battalion headquarters, but they sent me down to one of their units, one of the subordinate units, because it was a time in the war where we couldn't even get units to full strength to deploy them, but we got them as full as we could and then deployed them and tried to make do with the units that we had on ground. And so there was a vacancy in a unit. I got sent down to actually attach to a reserve unit to do my platoon leader time. We were a supply platoon when I first got there, but within 60 days, Kellogg Brown and Root, which is a subsidiary of Halliburton, took over 3 of my 4 warehousing missions, and my entire platoon got turned into a force protection platoon, both around the base that we were stationed at in Taji, Iraq, but also to do convoy security of logistics convoys. So in effect, we became a gun truck platoon, as they called it. To help your listeners understand what that is we were the more agile vehicles around, let's call them petroleum tankers or even flatbed trucks that can't be that agile as they're traveling across the country. And it was our job to have the heavy weaponry that protected the convoy from any ambush attacks in case we got hit by an IED, to protect the convoy in that instance, and with a larger goal of helping the logistics convoys get safely from one base to another. There was also the deployment where, unfortunately, there were losses. Thankfully, my second deployment, we didn't suffer any losses. But, this bracelet I wear every day as a fellow platoon leader who died doing exactly what I would have done if I was in his shoes. And I was in his shoes many days as a lead gun truck platoon leader. But, I made it home and he didn't. And it's important to me to sort of not only remember his legacy, but I feel a certain sense of responsibility to live a life that was worthy of his sacrifice.
It's a lot.
And then we also lost a soldier who was just shy of his 19th birthday, which again is for a reminder of your listeners. We ask, very, very young people, not only to walk the fine line between gun shy and trigger happy in war, but to, basically risk the full potential of their life on behalf of our country. So that was the intense deployment. My second deployment was January 2007 through April of 2008. I was there during the surge, largely, doing a staff leadership role on base, very different circumstances, but it's still tough to spend 15 months abroad, as a part of a war and without your support network, et cetera. But yeah.
What is that guy's name on the bracelet, and what happened to him?
Second Lieutenant Clifford Gadsden. Thank you for asking, actually. He died in April of 2005. It was a time in the war where, the summer of 2004, Fallujah was like crazy nuts. And then that following spring, Baghdad was nuts. And there were a lot of car bombs. He was the lead gun truck on a logistics convoy. I was talking to a lot of people when there was a debate around, but I guess it's still going on, policing reform in our country. What blew my mind was that essentially we had what I feel like were greater escalation of force protocols in Iraq than our own police do here at home.
Wow.
Because essentially you don't just, see somebody and shoot them, even though there was reason to be vigilant. And of course, we wanted to protect ourselves and our troops as much as possible. But this is a battlefield with a lot of civilians on it. So if you're literally riding up the highway, which the Baghdad highways are no different than highways in our country, oftentimes you come across civilian traffic. Well, at a certain point in the war, a lot of civilian vehicles knew to just basically get out of the way of American convoys. But if they didn't, what you would do is try to shout at them and make sure that they noticed that we were coming up behind them. It wasn't uncommon for my soldiers to leave the gate with a bunch of, the gunner sits out on top of the vehicle. And inside their turret, they would put rocks, or sometimes they'd have their own bottle of water there too, and use objects. If the civilian vehicle didn't hear them shouting, the next thing that they would do when they would escalate force is just like throw rocks at them, maybe throw a water bottle. And then, something that I've done myself was, if you get close enough to them, you just sort of like bump the vehicle on a very crowded highway. There was a point where I opened up my up armored door and bumped the vehicle next to us. But you also, if you're the lead convoy, if you get up close on the vehicle, you can just sort of like bump bumper to bumper, if that makes sense, to just push them out of the way onto the shoulder so the convoy can get past. And it was right when he bumped bumper to bumper that the car blew itself up. When you're the platoon leader, you have a driver, you're sitting in the shotgun seat, if you will. You have a gunner above you. So he was the closest to the contact. He ended up obviously not making it through that experience. The driver got blown out. The car ran over him, but he survived. And then the gunner got very badly burned, if you can imagine a vehicle blowing up, and he's exposed above the Humvee, but he did end up making it. And thanks to the, burn unit in San Antonio, Texas at Fort Sam Houston Hospital, was able to get through the experience. Although, both of the other soldiers who did make it through that are going to carry wartime wounds for the rest of their lives.
Right. Of course. Thank you for sharing that story with me. And
let me ask you, here we are 20 years since the invasion of Iraq. I feel like it hasn't gotten enough coverage. I'm not sure how media is supposed to editorially decide how to cover certain anniversaries of things, 9/11, the war, or whatever else. But I feel like it's always really important to look back and think about what happened there from a lot of different points of views and stakeholders and human beings. But I wanted to ask you, I know they asked you this on CBS too, and it's a really important question about that war. We can both support the veterans community and entirely and be against the conflict, be against the war, which has always been my stance. But when you look back at it, and when you talk to other veterans, and now as the CEO of IAVA, how do you think about the invasion, why we went, what we accomplished, and what was left behind, including so many people's lives and promises broken, as our friend Matthew Ho talked about? What are your thoughts 20 years later?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I'm glad that the anniversary is getting some decent attention. You never know with these kinds of things, especially because the wars themselves, even when they were still raging, struggled to get coverage at certain points. And so I'm glad that the anniversary is getting covered. I think it's an important moment for us to reflect on the lessons learned there. I would say as somebody who served, to keep your sanity when you go into war, you have to believe that the political leaders who are asking you to do that, and or the American people who are supporting, them authorizing the use of force and sending troops into harm's way, are asking the tough questions about the generals, or asking the tough questions from generals or the executive branch who wants to wage the war. You have to believe that there is a bigger picture here, even if you can't see it as boots on the ground. And so I think most of us, during our service, tried to stay in that place as much as we could, because, when you're actually out there serving, it is not helpful to think too much about the politics and or whether you agree with it or not. Because, you don't really get a choice in the matter anyway. And so I think from a psychological perspective, you just have to sort of hold on to the fact that, even if this, I was there during when the debate was really raging around the Iraq war, and I still tried to stay in that place. But, something I would encourage your listeners to think about going forward is the leader in wartime who has to look. I just mentioned, we lost 2 teammates on my first deployment. And those days are not just tough because you lost somebody, but I was a platoon leader who had soldiers then looking at me, basically emotionally spinning out, as we all do from time to time. And this was the, forcing function of that. But when they look at you and they say, what the fuck for? And you can't give them an answer. that's a really tough moment. As a leader, I want to be able to say, and I want future platoon leaders to be able to say, like, guys, this sucks. We need to come together in this moment. We all knew that this could happen to one of us one day, but we are here for a worthy cause, and our country's counting on us to fight for X, Y, and Z reason. Like, that's where you want to be able to be in that moment. But I can tell you, by the time I was deployed in 2005, it was a struggle to be able to give that clarity to our troops. And I don't want any platoon leader going forward to be in that moment. We need to set our leaders up for success in that moment when, unfortunately, people who are like family have made the ultimate sacrifice. And I think we owe that to their actual families as well, to be very clear that they know why their service member, fought and died, and understand that and be able to tell it to their kids.
So well said. Just a couple minutes left. I want to talk about where you hope to take the organization, which is such an amazing organization. But before we get to that, I just have to ask you the one big obvious question as a relation to the war and an issue that this organization that you're now the CEO of has been dealing with for a long time, which is suicide. I just read the other day that like 30,000 veterans of the Iraq and Afghanistan war generation have taken their lives. And we've heard these numbers like 20, 21, 22 a day, which is hard to believe that could still be happening daily. It almost seems like we run out of veterans. It's just a horrific number. But could you say a little bit about that? I know that just say a little bit about why that happens, why they are dealing with so much anguish and that they take their life.
Well, obviously every situation is different. I would say at the jump that it's an unfortunate circumstance that I don't know a single vet, no vet in my network. Do I know that I can say that they don't know another vet who hasn't taken their lives?
Jesus.
Everyone I know knows a vet who has taken their lives. In fact, one of my former soldiers actually took his life while still serving and deployed. The circumstances are very different for every person. Some of it is because they are suffering from the wounds of war. But, I think getting to the root cause of at least addressing veteran suicide, I think is also understanding the veteran as much as, mental health and trauma, which men who served in the military are twice as likely to have experienced childhood trauma than the average American male. And so if we can even help service members unpack, treat their childhood trauma that they're bringing into the military with them, not only will they be less likely to even suffer from PTSD, but we might also give them, it'll be a service for them if we can help them heal earlier and also give them tools that they can use that, should they experience wartime service again, might be helpful for them and would also, not as just as an individual, but might also help bring down the veteran suicide rate.
Yeah.
So there's honestly a lot going on there when it comes to the veteran community, but it is a sad statistic that you cited in terms of how many deaths of the war, how many more of them have died here at home far too early. It pales in comparison to the actual, literal on the ground wartime casualties.
It's crazy. It's just an insane statistic. How many have taken their life who versus how many died in either Afghanistan or Iraq. Why is this organization needed, IAVA? I mean, they've accomplished a lot, and I obviously know the answers to this, but you would think it would be easy to think, hey, listen, if you serve in the government, if you're a veteran, then the government should take care of you in terms of healthcare, in terms of work, employment, you should, education. So why is IAVA necessary?
Well, as much as I try to remain optimistic and, can shed light on the good things that are happening at the hands of politicians, especially in Congress and in federal office, I've learned in my time, though, that it helps to give them encouragement to do what other people would believe is the right thing. So, IAVA exists for two reasons. One, to do advocacy and make sure that politicians are getting the backs of our generation of veterans, but also candidly, because the other veterans organizations weren't stepping up to the plate for our generation of veterans' needs. And that's not just our needs in the short term, but also the unique needs of our generation. There are more women serving now in the military and a part of the veterans population than ever before.
Right.
But it took IAVA, and not even until 2017, for there to be a veterans organization out there in the world that made women veterans their number one priority versus just a asterisk or, oh yeah, we care about women veterans, And then, our generation too has a unique perspective that is in line with not just our generation of vets, but our generation across the board, where we're more open to alternative therapies like marijuana and psychedelics. And it's not just because, millennials, or let's call it, Gen Xers are generally, it's also because we're seeing people who are suffering through an opioid crisis too, and there are a lot of vets who are struggling with PTSD who maybe don't want to be shoved a bunch of pills all of the time to deal with their PTSD or chronic pain from wartime service going on, and want to be more open, especially because it's getting legalized in states across the country, using marijuana potentially to manage their PTSD. Or even better, there are studies now coming out that MDMA assisted therapy is actually helping some veterans heal from their PTSD. And wouldn't I want to research something that could heal veterans from their PTSD versus just using pot to survive for the rest of their lives, And these are areas that are uncomfortable, I think, for some of the legacy veterans organizations, and areas that are candidly uncomfortable for the very old politicians that are serving in Congress. But our organization can be a force for good by not only elevating our members' views on this, but also pushing, politicians and other organizations into this new uncomfortable area for them that we believe can actually help our members.
Make the pitch for why, if you're a veteran of these conflicts or any other, you should be a member, or why, if you're not, and you don't even know any veterans, which is the case with most of us, and you certainly are not for these wars, that you should support your organization.
So I think, most people are going about their business in life and aren't really engaging a lot in politics. You and I are outliers in that, Pete, and then your listeners are probably a little more dialed in, but, maybe not as much as, folks who've lived it every day of their lives. And so I would say, the reason you should join or give to IAVA is because we'll do it full time so you don't have to. So there's going to be a force out there that's going to make sure that politicians get the back of our veterans, and if you're a vet, we're doing that for you. But if you believe that vets should be taken care of, and oh, by the way, the way that we care about our veterans is very important if we continue to want to defend this country and fight our wars with an all-volunteer force. We have to send a strong message to the people who are signing up and putting on the uniform that we won't just take care of our troops while they're serving, but then when they take off the uniform, regardless, to your point, of whether we believed that the wars that they were fighting were just war or not, they were still a small sliver of Americans who are willing to actually put it all on the line, whether they agree with it or not either, to go serve for us, and that we have a certain sense of responsibility to take care of them when they take off the uniform, whether it's investing in them as we are doing so well with the GI Bill these days, or, taking care of their cancer treatments if they were unfairly exposed to toxic, whether it was burn pits or other toxins, because war at the end of the day is very messy. And, we can all look in hindsight and wish that we had, done some different things on the battlefield. But the reality is that if people are going to serve and know that not only they could get shot at, but they did just experience a whole host of other things during their wartime service, I think we as a country need to make sure that they will be as supported on the other side of their service as they are while they're actually, in uniform.
Love that answer. You're very good at this. I'm completely unsurprised. My final question is a fun one, I think. I think it's a fun one.
Okay.
Your bio says, and I've never really talked to you about this, I know that you did this, but your bio says Allison Jaslow has also worked closely with the entertainment industry, leading impact partnerships with several noteworthy films, including Warner Brothers' Dunkirk, Netflix's War Machine, and Bloodstripe, an independent film which depicts a woman Marine's transition from combat to civilian life. So you were the person who consulted the filmmaker? You were on the set. Did you meet Brad Pitt?
I did not meet Brad Pitt. I would be I would be open to consulting going forward in that capacity, but I will say, it's no surprise to you, Pete, that a lot of the influence of culture and pop culture in America in terms of like how people's biases are shaped. And so I think the value in doing impact partnerships with the entertainment industry is it allows us to have, like, through entertainment, it's like these movies that launch kind of open the door to a conversation.
Yeah.
And so a lot of my work with these sort of, military-esque movies is, using that as an open door to talk about our community. And to also make sure that people are remembering our community. And the more that we have, and, Blood Stripe is a good example too. Like, if there aren't more movies that are made that have women veterans in them, can we actually change the way America sees its veterans? It can't just happen because Allison Jaslow is on CBS Mornings or on Pete Dominic's podcast, or that I'm out there doing my advocacy too. That will change a little bit. That'll move a little bit of the needle. But as previously noted, there are only so many people who are like dialed super into like the news and the politics all the time. And we're going to change the way America sees its veterans and start to think of people who look like me as much as, the American snipers and the Navy SEALs out there in the world, probably only if there are more movies about women veterans. And it has to sink into the cultural zeitgeist to a certain extent to really truly change the way America sees its veterans. And I feel like, the value in doing impact partnerships with the entertainment industry is very much aligned with the work, but also an accelerant to kind of help get the visibility around our community that we so need.
You're such a smart person. You're so smart and intelligent, and the way that you speak is very. You taught at Duke. I mean, for goodness sake, who do you think is smart? Who have you learned a lot from? I talked to you. I learned from you. Who do you like? I see two tall people. Who's taller than you?
I think Rachel Maddow is probably the smartest person I've ever, been able to have a conversation with.
Wow.
I don't have a close relationship there, but in terms of like people who I admire from afar and their intelligence humbles me, I would definitely put Rachel Maddow on that pedestal. You mentioned teaching. It amazes me how much I learned from my students.
Right.
Like, I got as much from them and my experience with them as, I could hope that I was able to give to them.
Yeah.
But, Pete, the way I walk through life is there's like, we all have our like things we're best in class at. Right.
Yeah.
And so, I feel like there are a lot of people in my life where I've been able to get nuggets here and there to kind of like build the mentor that I need that maybe doesn't exist out there in the world, or the little pieces that I put together to build out the role model that I need, but maybe didn't see out there in the world.
I love that answer. And I think I did that with you. I remember vividly, as I say goodbye to you, but I'll end where I started. I remember a specific talk after I lost my job, and I remember exactly where I was. I was just out in the woods. I think we talked for about 2 hours, and I was just walking across this log when you were just dropping this great. You were hearing me and giving me advice and believing in me in a way that I didn't even believe in myself, and you barely knew me. And it was just, I'll just never forget those talks. They mean so much to me, as does this one and every other one I get to tape with you. Thank you so much. Congratulations. And we're all really lucky that you're in this position. Most importantly, everybody that gets to work with you and benefit from your work over at IAVA. I hope to talk to you soon, my friend. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks for having me, Pete.
All right, there she goes. Ladies and gentlemen, Allison Jaslow. What did you think? What did you think about her? Such an important person in my life. And I haven't had her on the show, and I'm not sure why I haven't had her on the show as much, but I hopefully I will more. Let me know how you thought and heard that interview with such a dedicated public servant, advocate, and friend. Real good friend to me, former Army captain, and now the president, the CEO of Iraq and Afghanistan Veterans of America. Check them out at IAVA, IAVA.org. And, of course, follow her and connect with her on social media And that's it. That's all I've got for you this week. Thanks to everybody who showed up at the Hangout. Thanks to everybody who subscribes. Thanks to Odessa Son and Pete Coe and John Carroll. Thank you to all of my amazing guests. If you missed anything, you can always go back, obviously, and listen to Virginia Heffernan and Jeff Charlotte yesterday, David Rothkopf and Glenn Kirshner the day before. The amazing Reverend Dr. Jackie Lewis joined me on Tuesday. Of course, investigative journalist, award-winning investigative journalist Amy Westervelt, the host of Drilled, joined me on Monday. Can't do it without your subscription. Sign up now if you haven't already. Now is the time. StandUpForPete.com or Patreon.com/Pete Dominic. Have a great weekend, and hopefully I'll get a show up for you Monday. I'm headed up to Vermont with Ava, where she's going to visit her friend, and I'm going to at UVM, University of Vermont, and I'm going to be skiing with my buddies who I grew up with that live up there now, and really looking forward to that. If you're up in Vermont and you want to grab a beer, let me know. I know it's short notice. Sorry about that. The whole trip was short notice. So thanks for listening. Have a great, great weekend, and I will hopefully talk to you Monday with the great Kevin Richburg, longtime listener, biologist, expert, super interesting guy. Can't wait to share that and him with you on Monday. But until then, I love you. Be good. I'll talk to you then.
They had to stand up. They had to stand up. They had a keen imagination for a crystal ball, drawing all the plans of a stand up. But all they had to go on was the time they were in, with other causes for laws, and since they weren't even sin, they knew that change was gonna come before the change could begin. They had to stand up. All right, they had to stand up. We got to stand up. We got to look the devil square in the eye. We gotta let him know it's his time to go, and make it clear when all we hear is a lie. Why you lying awake wondering where the money all went? It'll be the cost of freedom that'll go unspent. You can see him flee the scene of that experiment if you stand up. Alright, we got to speak up, we got to reach up and raise your voice in every way you know how. Don't be toes up, you got to show up. Ain't no better time to do it but now. No need to pledge allegiance to no wanton tribe. Rise up, show obedience to the voice inside, and listen well and it'll tell you not to run and hide. It says stand up.